Have you ever wondered why, after so many years of trying, your life is still almost exactly the same? You work more, you study more, you watch quite a few motivational videos. But deep inside, there is a familiar feeling. Everything is only moving very slowly or not changing at all. I have met many people like this in my life. They are not lazy. They are not lacking intelligence. Their problem lies somewhere else, somewhere most people never dare to look straight at. It is the standard they accept for themselves. Your life today is not the result of what you desire. It is the result of what you have allowed, tolerated, and considered normal over many years. You accept going to work, feeling drained and dissatisfied. Life will give you more of that. You accept shallow relationships, temporary habits, promises you make to yourself and then abandon. Life will respond in exactly the same way. The truth is, life rarely changes through inspiration. It only changes when your standards change. When you decide that you will no longer accept mediocrity, no longer accept procrastination disguised as excuses, no longer accept living below your own potential. At that very moment, the trajectory of your life begins to shift. In this video, I want to share with you the core principles of raising your personal standards, principles that have helped me and many others completely transform the way they live, work, and think. Not through fancy words, but through very real and profound changes from within. And stay until the end, because the final principle about how to adjust the sails of your life may be the missing piece you have lacked for many years. Principle 1. Raise your standards before you ask for a better life. I want you to understand one thing clearly from the very beginning. Life is not against you. It is simply responding to the exact standards you are setting for yourself. Many years ago, when I was younger, I did many different jobs. I worked hard. I stayed busy from morning until night. But what were the results? My life was still a struggle, my income was limited, and most importantly, I was not satisfied with myself. At that time, I was like many people, believing that if I just tried a little harder, everything would naturally get better. But then I realized an uncomfortable truth. The problem is not effort. The problem is standards. You can work many hours every day, but if you accept sloppiness, you will receive sloppy results. You can read many books, but if you accept knowing without doing, your life will still stand still. You can dream very big, but if your daily living standards remain low, that dream will exist only in your head. Let me ask you a very direct question. What are you accepting in your life right now that you should no longer accept? It could be a job that drains your energy, but you stay because it feels safe. A bad habit you clearly know is destroying your future, but you keep telling yourself, I'll deal with it tomorrow. Promises to yourself that you break over and over again, to the point where you no longer trust your own words. When you accept these things long enough, they become the unspoken standards of your life. And life always respects those standards, whether they are low or high. This is what most people fail to realize. Life does not require you to be perfect. It only requires you to be consistent with the standards you set. If your standard is just get it done, you will have a life that is just barely okay. If your standard is as long as it's not worse than others, you will live at an average level forever. But if you decide that, I will no longer accept living below my true capacity, then even if you do not yet know how, life begins to open new paths. Raising your standards does not mean you must do everything perfectly right away. It means you stop negotiating with things you know are wrong. You are late, you no longer accept it. You procrastinate, you no longer label it as a personality trait. You quit too early, you no longer justify it with circumstances. Standards are the line you draw between who you are now and who you are becoming. I have said this many times, and I want you to remember it. Your income rarely exceeds your level of personal development. Not because the world is unfair, but because the world operates on the principle of value. When you raise your standards in knowledge, skills, discipline, and attitude, you become a more valuable person and rewards come as a natural consequence. Look around you. The people you admire are not necessarily the most talented, but they share one thing in common. They do not accept mediocrity in themselves. They do not wait for inspiration to act. They act because that is the standard they have set. And this is the most important part of this principle. You do not raise your standards once and be done with it. You must protect them every day. Every morning you are voting for the person you are becoming. By what time you wake up, by whether you do what is important or what is easy, by whether you keep your promises to yourself or continue to break them. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, if your current standards remain unchanged, what will your life look like in 5 years? And if that answer makes you uncomfortable, then perhaps it is time for a new standard, not to pressure yourself, but to give yourself a chance to live up to your true potential. In the next part, I want to talk to you about something even more dangerous than low standards. It is the things you silently endure every day without realizing that they are shaping your future. Principle 2. What you tolerate becomes your future. There is a silent but extremely powerful law operating in your life, whether you realize it or not. It is the law of tolerance. What you allow to exist long enough in your life will eventually take root. And once it takes root, it begins to shape your future. Most people do not fail because of big decisions. They fail because of the small things they accept every day. You tolerate being a few minutes late. You tolerate doing half-hearted work. You tolerate feeling dissatisfied with yourself, then tell yourself, everyone is like that. But life does not listen to what you say. Life only looks at what you repeatedly accept. I have observed this for many years. When someone tells me they want a better life, I do not ask them what they dream of. I ask them a different question. What are you tolerating that you should no longer tolerate? Because there, the answer is always very clear. A person tolerates a job that drains them, but they do not learn new skills. A relationship lacking respect because they are afraid of being alone. A bad habit they clearly know is destroying their future. They do not realize that every day they do not change. They are voting to keep their current life exactly the same. The danger of tolerance lies here. It does not cause pain immediately. It quietly numbs you. At first you feel uncomfortable. Then you gradually get used to it. And finally you call it reality. That is when your standards are lowered without you even realizing it. Let me say this very clearly. You cannot build an extraordinary life on a foundation of things you let slide. If you accept saying, I will do it, and then not doing it, you are teaching yourself that your words have no value. Postponing important things, you are teaching yourself that the future is less important than present comfort. Blaming circumstances, you are handing control of your life to something other than yourself. And life always learns very quickly the lessons you teach it. I have met people who say they lack motivation, but the problem is not a lack of motivation. The problem is that they have tolerated a life that does not fit them for so long that they have forgotten what it feels like to live with purpose. Motivation does not disappear. It is only buried under prolonged small compromises. Imagine living in a room with an unpleasant smell. At first you feel very uncomfortable, but after a few days you get used to the smell. Not because the smell disappears, but because you have adapted to it. Life is the same. You can adapt to mediocrity, lack of discipline, stagnation. But the price you pay is your own potential. That is why the real turning point does not come when you gain more inspiration. It comes when you make a very specific decision. I will no longer accept this. No longer accept living without a plan, working without standards, talking more than acting. That decision may not change your life on that very day, but it changes the direction of your life, and that is what truly matters. You do not need to change everything at once. Just start with one thing you stop tolerating. Stop tolerating meaningless late nights. Stop tolerating postponing an important conversation. Stop tolerating living without investing in yourself. Each time you stop tolerating something wrong, you raise your standards, even if only a little. And little by little, life will begin to respond. Pause and ask yourself honestly, what in your life has existed for too long simply because you silently tolerated it? Because until you dare to face that question, you are still allowing your future to be decided by what you let slide. In the next part, I want to take you one step deeper. Because even when you raise your standards and stop tolerating what is wrong, there is still a more important question. What kind of person do you need to become to deserve the life you are seeking? Principle 3. Become more before you earn more. There is a very common mistake I have seen repeated for many years. People try to demand more from life while not being ready to become more. They want higher income, but do not increase their personal value. They want more respect, but do not raise their standards of behavior. They want bigger opportunities, but do not prepare matching capabilities. And then they become disappointed, bitter, believing life is unfair. The truth is this: life does not reward desire. Life rewards value. When I was younger, I used to think that working hard was enough. I went to work, I stayed busy, I hoped my superiors would see my effort. But results came very slowly, not because someone held me back, but because I did not understand a core principle. Your income rarely exceeds your level of personal development. If you do not learn more, you can only do the same old things. If you do not change the way you think, you can only create familiar results. If you do not raise your standards in knowledge, skills, and attitude, you cannot expect exceptional rewards. Look at nature. A tree cannot produce fruit larger than its own size. It must grow first, then the fruit grows accordingly. Humans are the same. Many people spend their entire lives focused on the question, how do I make more money? When the right question should be, what kind of person do I need to become to deserve that level of income? When you change the question, your direction changes completely. You no longer just look for tips, tricks, or shortcuts. You begin to invest in how you think when facing difficulties. Thank you. How you respond to failure. How you learn instead of defending your ego. And this is very important. You are not paid for effort. You are paid for the value you deliver. Two people can work the same number of hours. One produces results 10 times greater than the other. The difference is not in time, but in the person behind that time. When you raise your standards to become someone who is punctual, you become reliable. Someone who keeps their word, you build credibility. Someone who learns continuously, you become rare. And the world always pays a high price for what is rare. I want you to understand this deeply. Success is not something you chase, it is something you attract when you become the right person. If you want a better life, do not just ask, what does life need to change? Ask, what do I need to change within myself? How you use your time, how you talk to yourself, how you act when no one is watching. Because who you are when no one is watching will determine the life you have when everyone is watching. Many people tell me they do not have time for personal development. But the truth is, you do not lack time. You lack standards for how you use time. If your standard is, one more hour of social media, you will find the time. Learning a new skill, you are too busy. That is not a time problem. That is a priority problem, and priorities always reflect standards. Start with very small but very real things. Read 10 pages a day instead of waiting for inspiration. Write down the lesson after every mistake. Ask yourself every night, in what way did I become better today? These things will not make you rich immediately, but they will make you the kind of person capable of creating wealth. And that is the only sustainable path. If you feel these principles are speaking directly to what you need right now, subscribe to the channel to continue the journey of growth with me. We still have many important lessons ahead. Remember, life does not lift you up according to your desires. It lifts you up according to the person you become each day. And next, I want to talk about a very important shift. Even when you raise your standards and invest in becoming a better person, there is still a barrier that can pull you back to the starting point, the habit of blaming and avoiding responsibility. And until you overcome that, you have not truly taken control of your life. Principle 4, no more blame, total personal responsibility. There is a pivotal moment in every person's life, a quiet moment, but a decisive one. It is the moment you stop asking, who did this to me, and start asking, what is my part in this? Most people do not fail because they lack opportunities. They fail because they hand the control of their lives to something other than themselves. They say, I was born unlucky. The economy is tough. My family doesn't support me. My boss is unfair. Times are too competitive now. All of those things may be true, but there is an even more important truth. Not a single one of those excuses moves your life forward even one step. When I was younger, I did what many people do. I looked outward for reasons for results that were not what I wanted. And while I was busy explaining, life kept moving on. Then I realized something that changed everything. The moment you blame, you give up the power to change. Because if the cause is outside of you, then the solution must also be outside of you. And that makes you someone who waits, not someone who creates. Taking personal responsibility does not mean blaming or tormenting yourself. It means acknowledging that you always have a part in the results you are living, even if it is only 1%. And that 1% is where the power is. When you say, I take responsibility for how I respond. I take responsibility for the standards I set. I take responsibility for what I do, even when circumstances are not favorable. In that moment, you take back the steering wheel of your ship. Let me be blunt. You cannot control everything that happens in life, but you can always control how you face it. Two people can experience the same crisis. One uses it as an excuse to retreat. The other uses it as raw material to grow. The difference is not in circumstances. It is in the level of responsibility they are willing to carry. Blame always provides a short-term benefit. It makes you feel relieved in the moment. But the price is a life that stays stuck. Responsibility is the opposite. It can feel heavy at first, but the reward is freedom. Because when you accept responsibility, you also claim the right to act. If your skills are not strong enough, you can learn. If your discipline is weak, you can train it. If your results are poor, you can change how you do things. But all of that begins only when you stop saying, "It's not my fault," and start saying, "What will I do next?" There is a very high standard I want you to consider. The standard of a truly mature person is not needing anyone to come save them, not because they do not need help, but because they do not place their life in someone else's hands. They do not wait for their boss to change, the market to get easier, circumstances to become more favorable. They change themselves first. And when you do that long enough, something interesting happens. Life begins to cooperate with you. Not because it becomes easier, but because you become stronger. Try a very simple but very real exercise. For the next 7 days, every time you want to blame, pause and ask one single question. In this situation, what could I do better? You do not need a perfect answer, just an honest one. You will be surprised to see that question alone is enough to change how you act. Because responsibility is not a burden. It is the privilege of someone who has choices. And here is the most important part of this principle. When you take responsibility for your life, you must also take responsibility for protecting your standards every day. But how do you protect those standards when your emotions are low, when motivation runs dry, when no one is watching? The answer lies in something most people misunderstand: discipline. In the next part, I want to show you why discipline is not a prison for your life, but the most loyal gatekeeper of the standards you have worked so hard to build. Principle 5. Discipline is the guardian of your standards. There is a major misunderstanding that makes many people avoid discipline their entire lives. They think discipline is force, a loss of freedom, a dry, rigid life with no joy. But I want to tell you this clearly. Discipline does not take away your freedom. Discipline creates freedom. The truth is, you and I, all of us, must endure one of two pains: the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. The only difference is, discipline hurts at first, while regret hurts forever later. When you raise your standards for living, the issue is no longer knowing what is right. The issue is, who will protect that standard when you are tired, discouraged, or unmotivated? The answer is discipline. Motivation is wonderful, but it is not reliable. Some days you feel full of energy. Some days you just want to quit. If your life depends on emotions, your standards will rise and fall like the weather. Discipline is different. Discipline does not ask, "Do you feel like it?" It asks, "Does this match your standards?" When I was younger, I used to wait for inspiration. I thought I had to want to do something in order to do it well. But then I realized, the people who go far are not the ones who always feel inspired. They are the ones who still act when inspiration disappears. Look at any field you admire. Healthy people are not healthy because they always enjoy working out, but because they have standards for their health. People who succeed at work are not successful because they are always excited, but because they have standards for performance. Reliable people are not reliable because they have good intentions, but because they have the discipline to keep their word. Discipline is the concrete action of standards. If your standard is self-respect, your discipline is saying no to things that weaken you. Daily growth, your discipline is learning even when you are tired. Purpose-driven living, your discipline is doing what is important before what is easy. Many people say they do not have discipline, but the truth is, they do have discipline. They are just using it to maintain a life below their potential. They have the discipline to stay up late every night, check their phone constantly, postpone important tasks. The problem is not a lack of discipline. The problem is what standard your discipline is serving. Discipline does not have to be huge. It needs to be consistent. You do not need to read 100 pages a day. You need to read 10 pages every day. You do not need to change your entire life in a month. You need to keep one small promise to yourself today, because every time you keep your word to yourself, you send a very powerful message. I am someone who can be trusted. And when you trust yourself, you begin to dare to set higher standards. There is one thing I want you to remember. Discipline is not built through willpower, but through structure. If you rely on willpower, you will lose when you are tired. If you rely on structure, you will move forward even when you do not feel like it. Prepare your environment in advance. Schedule what matters. Remove temptations instead of fighting them. That is not weakness, that is wisdom. Discipline does not turn you into a rigid person. It frees up mental energy so you can focus on what truly matters. And here is the biggest paradox. When you are disciplined with small things, you gain freedom with big things. Freedom financially, freedom with time, freedom in choosing your life. But it all begins with whether you have enough discipline to protect your standards every day. Ask yourself honestly, what standard in your life right now is not being protected by discipline? Because a standard that is not protected will sooner or later be pulled down. In the next part, I want to talk to you about an often underestimated factor, but one that has a stronger impact on your standards of living than you might think. The people you spend time with every day. And if you do not choose that proactively, the world will choose it for you. Principle 6, your standards are reflected in your circle. There is a truth very few people want to admit, but it is always true. Your life is shaped not only by the decisions you make, but also by the people you allow close to you. You can set very high standards for yourself. You can say you want to change, to grow, to live a bigger life. But if every day you remain in an environment that pulls you down, those standards will be eroded slowly but surely. I have observed this for many years. When someone tells me they want to move forward but cannot, I do not look at their work schedule first. I look at their circle, because standards do not exist only in your mind. They are reinforced or destroyed by the people around you. If you are in a group where procrastination is considered normal, complaining is the main topic, effort is mocked as trying too hard, then no matter how determined you are, you will be swimming upstream every day. And swimming upstream continuously exhausts most people. There is a very famous saying that I believe is true in most cases. You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Not because they control you, but because their standards gradually become your standards. If the people around you do not read, reading becomes strange. If the people around you have no goals, talking about the future becomes unrealistic. If the people around you do not keep their word, breaking commitments becomes normal. Standards do not collapse in a single day. They collapse through repeated conversations. But here is what I want you to understand clearly. Raising the standard of your relationships does not mean looking down on or discarding anyone. It means you actively protect your direction. There are good people who are simply not aligned with where you want to go. There are relationships that were once meaningful but no longer support who you are becoming. And here's the hardest lesson. You cannot take everyone with you on a growth journey. When you raise your standards of living, some people will feel uncomfortable. Not because you are wrong, but because your change reflects what they are not ready to face. They may say, "You've changed. Why are you suddenly so serious?" Living like that is exhausting. That is not the truth. That is the fear of being left behind. You need to understand this clearly, so you do not confuse it. You are not responsible for shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. High standards do not make you arrogant. They make you directed. And when you have direction, you start making different choices. You choose conversations that help you learn. You choose people who challenge you to become better. You choose environments where effort is respected. What is interesting is this. When you change your standards, your circle will also change sometimes without you trying. Some people will leave on their own. Some relationships will naturally fade. And then new people more aligned will appear. Not by chance, by law. Let me ask you a very direct question. Are the people you interact with every day raising your standards or pulling them down? After talking to them, do you feel more energized or drained? Are you encouraged to act or encouraged to delay? Do you feel challenged or comforted into staying the same? The answers will tell you a lot about your future. You do not need to cut off every relationship, but you do need clear boundaries. Boundaries for time, boundaries for energy, boundaries for conversations that no longer serve your standards. Because if you do not actively choose your environment, the environment will actively choose your results for you. And here is the final thing I want you to remember from this principle. Environment does not only influence behavior, it influences belief about what is possible. When you are around people who are moving forward, you begin to believe, "I can too." And that belief, when combined with standards and discipline, becomes a force that is very difficult to stop. In the final part, I want to tie everything we have discussed together with a very simple image, but one that can change how you see your life forever. Because life does not always change according to your wishes, but you can always change how you steer it. Principle 7, adjust the sails, not the wind. There is something I learned very early, and it has stayed with me my entire life. You do not get to choose the wind, but you always get to adjust the sails. Many people wait for life to become more favorable before they begin. They wait for a more stable economy, easier circumstances, other people to change first. But the wind does not wait for anyone. Time keeps moving. And while they are waiting, Their lives drift along the old momentum. Imagine your life as a ship at sea. The wind is circumstance, the market, family, health, the times things you cannot control. It blows on everyone without favoritism. Some people go far, some run aground, some spin in place. The difference is not the wind, it is how they set their sails. Your sails are the standards you set for yourself, what you accept and what you refuse to accept, the discipline you maintain when no one is watching, the responsibility you are willing to carry, the environment you deliberately choose. When the sails are set correctly, even a headwind can move you forward. But if the sails are torn, if standards are low, discipline is weak, responsibility is vague, then even a favorable wind will only make you drift. This is why two people can go through the same crisis. One collapses, the other grows exponentially, not because one is luckier, but because they prepared different sails beforehand. I want you to look back at the entire journey we have just taken. When you raise your standards, you decide where you want to go. When you stop tolerating what is wrong, you patch the holes in the ship. When you become a better person, you strengthen the ship. When you take total responsibility, you take the helm. When you maintain discipline, you keep the sails full. When you choose the right environment, you avoid currents that pull you backward. None of these steps is unnecessary. They connect into a living system. And that system will determine how far you go, not in a month, but in a lifetime. Remember this. Life does not reward those who complain about the wind. It rewards those who learn how to control the sails. You do not need to control the whole world. You only need to control how you start your day, what you allow into your mind, the standards you protect when you are tired. Each of those small choices is a sail adjustment. And over time, your direction will change completely. If there is one thing I want you to take with you after this video, it is this. Your life tomorrow is determined by the standards you keep today. You do not need to do everything at once, but you do need to do the right thing. And do it now. Ask yourself, what standard do I need to raise today? What will I no longer accept from now on? What is one small but correct action I can take immediately after this video? If those questions resonate with you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone you believe also needs to raise their standards of living. And leave a comment to let me know which principle in this video made you think the most and how you will apply it in your life. You and I both have one gift today. Use it wisely. I will see you in the next video.